So we are the National Hybrid Schools Project. We started this here at Kennesaw State in 2020, right in the teeth of COVID. And our main work is to kind of host convenings like this one. And so I'm glad to see that it's getting bigger every year. This is the biggest one we've had yet. So thanks for being part of that. We also do academic research. As part of an outgrowth of these conferences, we also have started this thing called the Hybrid Schools Society. So this is kind of a map of where our members are coming from. We do regular different kinds of practical trainings on different things that people might want to know about starting or running or maintaining a hybrid school. A really interesting thing about this year's conference is that for the first time, the past 2 years, we did all of the programming. Almost all the programming this year was concocted and pitched and put together by Hybrid School Society members. So thank you all for doing that. And yeah, blame yourselves if you don't like it. We also have some great exhibitors. I'm glad to see that you all were visiting them today. We have lots of exhibitors out here that you can go visit. They're a diverse group and they offer lots of different services. So they'll be there all day, but there's also a dedicated time at 11:15 to 11:45 for you to go spend time and see what all they're doing. Special thank you to our three major sponsors, EdChoice and Vela and Yes Every Kid Foundation. I always trip over that one, I'm sorry. And so we're gonna offer some words from each of them today. We're also gonna do some giveaways from each of them, but I have to remind everybody that there's one rule with our giveaways. We've got everyone's name in a bag up here, but the one rule is you have to be present in the room to win, right? If you are out and gone, no win, right? You don't get any prizes. So if we could have Mike Donnelly come up, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Yes Every Kid Foundation and give some stuff away.
Right on. Ooh. Right on. Thank you, Eric. Big thank you to the team here. Awesome conference. I see we have a bunch of very introverted, wallflowery type people who are not at all social. This is amazing. The energy in this room is fantastic. And thank you, Kennesaw State, for investing in this movement. Friends, I'm very grateful to be here with you today. It's great to meet some new friends and to see some very old and dear friends. And you're a very inspiring group of people, what you're doing. You are, I mean, you probably knew this, but you are pioneers. You are part of a growing movement that is going to change the way our whole country thinks about education. Okay, did you realize that? Yeah? If you didn't realize it, let me just be the first to tell you that, okay? My friend Deborah Bell from AIM Academy is here. I've known her for many years, and she said, yeah, we're gonna pull a Silicon Valley on this country. We're not asking for permission, we're disrupting. That's right on. Well, think about this. 60 years ago, only about 10% of children learned outside the system. Today, that number is closer to 30%. Yeah, that's, oh, go America, right? 40 years ago, there were 0 homeschoolers. Now there are millions. Oh yeah, go homeschoolers. I'm a homeschooler. 30 years ago, there were 0 charter schools. Now there are 8,000. Yeah. 20 years ago, not a single state had any kind of tax credit or tax-funded program like an STO or an ESA. Now about 40 states have one or both. And my friend Rob Enlow is here, and there's a couple states I'm counting, Rob, in case you're wondering, that you don't have on your map that I count in that, so just FYI. 10 years ago, no one had ever heard of micro schools or learning pods, hybrid schools, Christian hybrid collaborative, I just learned a new one over here, collaborative, whatever. Whatever you want to call innovative, unconventional, permissionless learning environments, today there are thousands of them. You're a small percentage of the many that are out there. So what do you call that? What do you call that? Freedom, opportunity? I call that momentum. Momentum, the big mo. After 170 years of rigid, top-down, one-size-fits-none systems, you think people might be ready for a change? Yeah, I think so. Our vision at Yes is to accelerate that momentum. We envision a dynamic marketplace where families and you are free. Free, meaning without outside interference, and you know who I'm talking about. To create educational experiences that meet the individualized needs and preferences of the children in your communities. wherever that may be. Our goal is to remove barriers to that free market by designing and advocating for policy that families want, implementing policies in a family-centered way, and by helping you, the education entrepreneurs, the engines of growth in the supply of this new movement, to help you navigate what is to many a confusing and, maybe scary, I don't know, regulatory legal landscape. So let me ask you this question. Where do you get answers to regulatory and legal questions? Do you try and DIY? I mean, Home Depot, right, for the homeowner. Legal questions, how do you DIY that? I mean, you Google, right? You try and figure it out. But it can be tough to figure out what these laws mean if you can even find them. Or maybe you can phone a friend, you know. Well, you can ask your neighbor legal questions like, hey, can you help me fix my sink? I have a legal question for you. Or maybe you hire a lawyer. But chances are, if you went to your lawyer down the street or in the town hall or in the town center, and you're trying to explain we're this Christian collaborative hybrid, child care. No, we're not child care. No, we're not really a school. And they're going to look at you like, you want me to help you? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to get into this crazy, I can't understand what you mean. Or they will say, oh, you better believe, we'll help you. $400 an hour, $5,000 up front, right? Or maybe $2,500 if they're being nice. I wonder if you are asking any of these questions. I'm just curious. Tell me afterwards if you've asked one of these questions. Are you curious about what is the best way to operate under your state's education laws? Do you ever wonder about child care laws, zoning, fire, health codes? Have you ever been concerned about how to respond if a state or local regulator bothers you? I've talked to some of you who've had that happen to you. Maybe you're not sure if you should be a for-profit or a nonprofit corporation, or whether you should even be a corporation at all. What if you could find a lawyer who understood your vision, supported your vision, and was an expert in the legal and regulatory areas that affect you? And what if you could ask that lawyer, or those lawyers, your questions for free? Would that be cool? Was that Shakira? Who did that? This is what we're trying to do with the Yes Foundation Education Entrepreneur Support Program. I like to call you edupreneurs. Okay, that's what I like. I was talking to Shakira earlier. She's like, yeah, you're my legal team. I'm like, yeah, cool, I like that. I like being Shakira's legal team. We want to be your legal team. We believe in your vision, and we're specializing in understanding this compliance landscape, and we want to help you on your journey. So quick show of hands, if you don't mind. How many of you have contacted Yes Legal to get a little bit of help? So that's a pretty good number. That's great. That's great. Well, that's awesome. We've launched a new platform. You've got the information on your table. It takes 30 seconds to sign up. And our team is here. If I could just ask the lawyers to stand up. Some of you have met them already, but Lynn, where are you? Lynn is here. Lauren. Okay, very cool. They're here. I just outed the lawyers. Go talk to them. And on behalf of our team at Yes, we want to thank you for what you're doing to build a better future for families. We look forward to serving you.
All right, so we're going to start our first panel, our first whole group panel. I titled this session, The 100-Year School, Sustaining Innovation and Building Legacies in Hybrid Schools. So obviously that title is a little bit of an exaggeration, right? Maybe, but the point I'm trying to get at is how might we think about this idea of longevity, sustainability, succession in hybrid schools and micro schools? So, if we have a conventional school, it gets started by some government entity, and then it just kind of lives forever, right? Oftentimes these schools, the schools that are in this room, are maybe the vision of one person, but just as often they come from, some small community kind of banding together with the idea of setting something up for their kids or even their grandkids, right? So the founders might move on, but the community is still around. So this will be kind of a conversational session, but I'll open with a few starter questions. But before we do that, I want to introduce our panelists. Lori Lane was supposed to be on this panel from Ardios Academies, but she is ill and couldn't make it. But we still have Shiren Rattigan from Colossal Academy in Fort Lauderdale. Right? And we have Robert Randolph from the Family Business Center at Kennesaw State University. Right? So first, if each of you, we'll start with Shiren, if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and how you think about the idea of longevity and sustainability in the setting of hybrid schools and micro schools.
Thank you so much, Eric. This conference is my favorite of the year, so thank you so much for having us. So my name is Shiren Rattigan. I am a fifth-generation educator. My great aunt got her master's in education, and my great-grandmother used to run a one-room schoolhouse on a farm. My grandfather is the superintendent of schools in a farm town in Illinois. My mother is a special education teacher for over 35 years in a very impoverished neighborhood outside of Chicago. And then it's me. So, we've been doing education in our family for a very long time. Are there any children of teachers here? Are there any? Oh, yay, I love you guys. So the thing that we've gathered and we've learned and we embody is being an educator, right? Like every moment, especially when you are raised by teachers, is a teachable moment, right? Like every moment is about becoming independent and learning something from life, right? What we didn't gain, though, because I come from farmers and I come from teachers, our farmland is sold. And I don't have any wealth that has been passed down to us because, unfortunately, in the current state, our educators are not paid very well. So really, I wanted to become the change maker and the cycle breaker of, like, how do I encapsulate all of this beautiful knowledge that has been passed down through me and gift it to my children? I think Eric and I were talking about this after the Harvard, the Emerging Model Conference about really a 7-generation school and like what does that look like and how do I create a model that we can continue to pass down to my children and my children's children and my children's children and so on and so forth, but also that it would be sustainable and build wealth and capital within our family. And that was just a challenge that I feel like I'm charged to do, and I really do believe so firmly in educators and what our potential is. So it's super exciting to be here to talk about longevity and where we're going with it, and it's totally possible to build wealth within your business as an entrepreneur.
Hi, my name is Robert Randolph. I'm the research director of the Family Enterprise Center at Kennesaw State University. And I don't actually have a huge amount of experience specifically with hybrid schools, but what I do have experience with, I guess I am a child of homeschool. I grew up in a very rural environment. My mother, who's also a waitress, took care of most of our education, which was very normal in the very rural area that I grew up with. We did have some county level support. I had a speech therapist drive who knows how many hours every now and again to our house, which was really cool. And so I guess in that way it was a little hybrid. But other than that, most of my interest, most of my work is actually in family businesses. And one of the best, most interesting things is the 100-year family business is not an exaggeration at all. I work with multi-generational businesses, this idea of designing strategies for longevity, for incorporating multiple economic and non-economic goals, developing strategies based off of family-centered values and belief systems. Those all have long track records of success in family business, which is a somewhat niche area in the business school. When you get a business degree, if any of you have business degrees or if you work in business schools, the majority of business school education really focuses on really the largest economic engines of our country and world, which are large corporatized institutions. There's a lot to learn there. There really is a lot that we learn from those groups. But studying entrepreneurship and small business, we always are reminded that those large institutions, like everything else, they grow and they plateau and they shake and they fall and they create voids. And those institutional voids need to be filled by entrepreneurs. And whether that entrepreneurial innovation comes from a for-profit area or a high-tech area or in education, those processes stay the same. And so I'm excited to learn more about hybrid schools specifically, but more than anything, I've enjoyed the conversations that I've had a lot because it's shown that there's the needs of hybrid schools, the growing long-term sustainable hybrid schools, I think are going to look a lot like family businesses. And so I'm excited to see the extent of those overlaps.
Thanks. All right. So there is a little bit of tension here, though, because we know, so we want these institutions to last for some amount of time, but we know, just by their nature, they're going to close more often than conventional schools do, right? Just because people leave, they're just more vulnerable because they're not as big. So that's okay, but it would be probably a bad outcome if we just had this constant churn of micro schools popping up and then closing, and then, you know, I think we're not close to the point where people are going to be sick of that, but the market would tell you, right, when parents start saying, well, I wanted to go to this micro school or this hybrid school, but they close so much, I'm just going to stay at my conventional public school. Like, we're not there yet, but that is a thing to think about. So to what extent is all this churn among the schools of concern to you?
You want me to start? Sure. So I'm actually not concerned about it. I think that innovation comes with a lot of ideation and a lot of really bad and sometimes wonky and silly looking innovation. So I want us to think back when we started to learn to fly. Like, we were going to put people in planes, and they're gonna be in the air and they're gonna fly. And how many models? Think back to like the Da Vinci drawings, right? How many models that failed? And that's actually really important that we're letting them fail. I think that the importance of it failing actually informs the better models. Like, we can learn what's not working, ideate, and make it better. I think that we're in this moment of like the Wright brothers like jumping off a cliff with wings, right? Like, it's just not, we're gonna have failures, and I think that's actually the natural process of it. I do feel that micro schools and hybrid schools are gonna be more fortified, and I think that we are gonna find that, I think of it as like chainmail, that we're gonna have like little links of all these micro schools, and we're gonna be super strong, but nimble and agile and flexible because we're small, right? Like, that is actually gonna allow us to change and be available and move to the market's needs. So closing's okay. I think that that's okay. But what we are gonna find is that people are gonna do things better, and they're gonna do it more efficient. Yeah, we're just in the early stages of innovation, so it's super exciting.
I similarly am not super concerned about churn from a market level for that exact same reason. So as entrepreneurial industries, entrepreneurial markets, new venture creation is a response to a need. That's why there's so many new ventures being created where there's so many needs. And the fact that there's more hybrid schools and micro schools being created, to me, means that there's likely more and more needs. But how we solve those needs, how we actually create best practices, how we inform new evolving industries, that's not clear. It's not intuitive. It takes true innovation, and true innovation means being really confident in something until it doesn't work, and then learning from that. If closing a venture stopped entrepreneurs from being entrepreneurial, we would have very few entrepreneurial ventures. And the churn of businesses, what we call a shakeout in entrepreneurship, those shakeouts are the most informative parts of industry growth, because the businesses that fail, they do so for a reason. That failure it's not an island. Maybe it's not a good reason, maybe it's not a reason you agree with, but both failure and success happens for a reason. And the long-term success of an industry, and even an individual business, is going to be much more predicated on their reactions to downturns, their reactions to failings, much more than it's going to be predicted by their initial trajectories, right? We can learn very little from initial trajectories. We learn way more from how businesses learn and grow and evolve. The worst part that I think facing that failure, which is still also very true for family businesses, is that if you are a new venture, a corporatized, professionalized new venture, and you have investors as your primary stakeholders and professional managers, those are not real, those are non-intimate ties, work with people that are very used to failure. A family business or a school, your key stakeholders can be non-professional ties. They're probably very intimate ties. And so that failure is so deep, it's so real. And that's something, how to handle entrepreneurial failure is a major question, not just facing hybrid schools, it's a major question facing how we support entrepreneurship in general. And so the fact that the shakeouts occur, I really don't think is scary for the industry. I think it's actually a good sign. It means there's enough excitement that people are throwing a lot of ideas at the wall. The scary part is for those individual companies experiencing those events without the support systems or without things like this, organizations like this that remind us that failure is part of it. And really, we're learning our best practices through those failures. We're developing those best practices right now. The people at the presentations at this conference right now, this year, are probably trying to share what those best practices, those industry key success factors are becoming. And so tapping into those resources, tapping into those networks, that's how you protect yourself from the bad sides of failure. And learning is how you make sure that you capture the good sides of failure.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll go to audience Q&A. So think of good questions, and we'll run a mic around to pick up your questions. But what do you both think is the biggest threat to the longevity of a hybrid school or micro school? And also, what's the best thing one of these schools could do to give themselves a shot at lasting for a long time?
Well, I think isolation and not feeling belongingness, regardless of wherever you're at in life, right? Not having an identity is the Achilles to what we're doing. So, Tony, if you could wave your hand, I'm going to shout you out. She's right here in the front in the green. We've developed an innovative educators network because we understand we have to be a network in order to be sustainable. Regardless of our religious backgrounds, our ideologies, our our reasons why, we have something really deep inside that we all are trying to figure out. How do we do business? How do we stay sustainable? How do we launch? How do we get visibility? And so we're doing that as a network. And so I think really not being a network, whatever that looks like, whether it be virtual, Vela Educator Fund, they do an amazing job of creating a beautiful network of folks that are answering the same questions. There's Microschool Florida here in the room, also creating a beautiful network to make sure we're not alone. You're not alone in this. You're not crazy. We're all a little bit crazy, but not that crazy. And that we're all receiving the same kind of information, like education needs to change, we can do this. And then sometimes it's literally just making a phone call and saying, I can't do this anymore. It's like, but you can. Let's run over your numbers again. Like, how can you? And so, making sure that people know that they have friends, and then you're not alone. I think that's going to be the way to maintain. Whether it's a large network like HiPod or Prenda, they're also creating beautiful networks of. Or Colossal Academy Network. We're trying to solve that problem of isolation, and I think that is what's going to drive longevity.
Biggest threats and biggest strengths. Let's see. So I would say the biggest threat facing any individual business, whether it's a school or not, is poor management. I would say that is the biggest reason that organizations fail, is an inability to capture your own capabilities in a way that you know how to leverage them. And so you're instead trying to leverage capabilities that you think you should have rather than ones you do have. That's a common problem for new business owners. And not having really and engaging in a way without strategic decision making, right? Being very opportunistic, being very reactionary. Those are really short term. Those are really limiting the success of a venture. But that's true for any individual business. Specifically for hybrid schools, you're in a weird, from my perspective, from an outside perspective, you're in a tough spot because you're not just an entrepreneurial industry. As we just were talking about, you're an entrepreneurial industry kind of competing against an incredibly powerful, entrenched monopoly. Maybe a monopoly that looks different across states, but if you're doing this in an industry economics class, it's an entrenched monopoly. That is a hard market to tap into. It takes disruption. It takes actually disrupting the normal way that value is created to be sustainable. So what's the biggest threat for industries like that? It's that monopoly taking over. That's the biggest threat, is that monopoly exerting its power and taking over those opportunities that you're currently pursuing. Now, it's a government monopoly, so you're probably not looking at anything moving very fast. It's probably not going to be like that. But you can certainly see that would be the institutional threat of this, is using new technology or new capabilities, maybe those, some interesting VR classrooms, and we say, no, everyone gets to be a public school because we're just sending every student these VR classrooms. I totally made that up, I'm not saying that's true. But that would be a threat to the industry as a whole. The opportunities, though, the best chances for disruptors, for entrepreneurial ventures to stay, are going to be when they can create new value in ways that are novel, that are not replicable, in ways that illustrate and show the flaws and voids of that monopoly's value chain. And if you compete and create companies or schools that use that value, that show that value, that embody that novel, distinctive value in ways that monopoly can't take over, that's how you disrupt it. That's how you create, that's how that industry starts getting shakier and shakier and shakier, and new norms and new best practices and new ways of understanding value and investment and return and outcomes start to get more of a seat at the table. So biggest threat would be more continued consolidation at the macro level. Best chance, leveraging your distinctive capabilities, investing more in what makes you distinctive more than what makes you replicate what else is out there, I would say would be a good survival chance.
Okay, great, thank you. So what questions do you have for our panelists about how to make your schools last?
Thank you so much. So I was talking with a parent at my school.
Sorry, will you also say where you're from?
Oh, sorry. Mount Tabor School, Kansas City, Missouri. I was talking with a parent from my school, and I used the word experiment. And I meant it in the sense of like the great experiment, you know, America. And what she heard was child experimentation. How do you talk with parents about, you know, you have this optimism and energy about the entrepreneurial aspect of the school, but how do you talk with parents who maybe don't see it that way? They're thinking, you know, my child needs to learn to read and write over, you know, 13 years, and how are they going to do it in this type of environment?
Can you hear me? Okay. That's a great question. I think that it's always something that I'm going back and forth, just as I still teach at my school, just so we're completely clear, and I still do the admissions. So that's something that comes up. And then, you know, I think that the more and more people are seeing the product of our micro schools, I mean, our test scores are going up, right, in the traditional sense, but more than that, they're happy. Our kids are happy. And what that means is that we're opposed to high suicide rates in the traditional education model. If nothing else, we're sparing their life, yeah? If nothing else, they can read, write, and they're happy, right? But we're also doing amazing things, like we're gardening. Micro schools are out surfing and skating, and micro schools are tending farms, and micro schools are doing all the community work, and we're responsive. So as we see your child needs to change and shift, curriculum, reading level, math level, whatever that looks like, we're gonna meet them. And we're small enough and we're nimble enough in a way that large institutions just can't do it. I'm a math teacher, 150 kids in my caseload, I would line up all the math tests and be like, wrong, 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 no name. And then like I would put it on the board and be like, if you don't collect this in a week, it goes in the bin. And I would like draw arrows to the bin. And you know, I think you guys can, like, how hard is it to write your name on this, right? Like, it just so, and it was not even, the system itself was damaging to the educators too. Like, it's damaging the kids, but it's also damaging the educators and the sacredness of what we do as educators, right? So I think, first of all, it's working. We're seeing that the test scores are going up. People are doing just fine. Beyond that, we have people now entering the universities and doing great. They're graduating earlier. They're hyper-focused on what they're supposed to be doing. They're not, you know, on Friday before they graduate asking and raising their hand to use the restroom and then having to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their life. We're preventing 40-year-old crises of like, who am I and what am I doing in the world? They're really leaving and ready to take on the world in a different way that our large traditional systems just aren't doing. So they're reading, and it's fine. They'll be fine readers. We're seeing that with norm reference tests. The trends across the country are that not only are they doing 1 year, but oftentimes they're doing multiple years of growth. And then on the other end of it, they're practicing and living in joy and their purpose. And I can't imagine any parent wanting more than that.
Robert, you said something that caught my attention. You said one of the things that small business owners and entrepreneurs try to do is leverage capabilities that they don't have, that they think they should have. That's very insightful, and I wonder if you would be able to unpack that a little bit. What does that look like? Like, can you put that into this context? Like, what would that look like trying to leverage a capability that you think you should have but don't have? And alternatively, what should you then do? Thank you.
So that's a fantastic question. So in terms of what does that look like, that mostly looks like replicating a current industry leader that's pursuing value that you're not trying to pursue. And so you have established leaders or established models that exist and that have longevity, but they don't actually, they don't represent the actual competitive advantage, the actual capabilities that you have, and so you're trying to replicate those outcomes. And so this might be using, so in small business, for instance, this comes up with entrepreneurs, maybe even just no employees, just their own individual business, and they come in with a lot of financial ratios and competitive information that's really more relevant for corporate governance than it is for small business management. And we have to sort of translate some of that and say, well, you're the only owner, so really equity, a lot of these earnings per share and equity measurements that you have aren't super relevant because you don't have other shareholders that you're communicating to. And so we create small business strategies that follow a lot of the same trends. We're not trying to, I would imagine that's true for yours, you're not trying to measure educational outcomes differently. You're not conceiving educational outcomes differently. But because you're pursuing models that are distinct, you're going to reach outcomes that are distinct. And if you can't, and the value is going to be in tapping into those distinctive outcomes that show that the value that you're creating is rare in that industry. Because if the value that you're creating is the same value that an embedded, entrenched institutional actor is creating, a lot harder to say that you're actually innovative or novel or doing something new. But at the same time, if you can't defend that, if you say, yeah, we have these outcomes, but it's an experiment, we don't know, then we also say, well, a good experiment is structured. The experiments are phenomenal. We can identify and tap into measurements and outcomes and models. And so if anything, I'd say treat it more like an experiment. You collect more information than you need and use that information to identify areas of creating value that maybe no one has ever seen before, and maybe benchmarks and best practices that need to come up right now that are brand new. And that's more innovation than specific hybrid. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. What do you mean by capability?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. What do you mean by capability? So a capability is essentially the tools, the means that your organization has to pursue opportunities. And so when you're creating when you're developing a strategy for an organization, you identify those capabilities that are internal to you, because that's where you're primarily reinvesting, and you identify where you're creating, and then that's separate from where you're creating value, maybe from suppliers, or maybe from partners. And so you don't want to invest in your suppliers' value chain. You want to leverage your supplier's value chain to help you, and you want to identify where your distinctive capabilities are so that you can invest in those and generate returns on that. And so that's the return imperative of strategic management. Is a good strategy doesn't look like a plan. It looks like an iterative process of measuring growth. And if you're measuring growth in a way that isn't relevant to your success, you might look like you're doing really well, and then you might be surprised when the market says, no, you're not doing really well. You're running out of money, you're running out of customers or students. So yeah, the means that you have to pursue opportunities.
Going back to the question before about churn and quote unquote failure, I think things like that, like the West Virginia micro school that closed earlier this year, I think it was, and that got a lot of attention, of course. But there's also kind of the hidden failure, like Shiren, the stories that you're talking about with the kids in the classrooms, or schools graduating kids who literally can't read. And those types of failures are much more prevalent and much less talked about. And do you have any ideas for how to kind of change people's mindset of what failure is? Like, a bad school closing is not a failure. A bad school graduating kids who can't read is a failure.
So that's, again, an absolutely fantastic question, because to me that means that we don't actually, that what we need are good key success factors. And so when you're developing a business. I know, I feel like a business professor. That was my worst fear when I was coming up here, was that I was going to go back into my strategy classroom. But industries are important, right? We learn about success. We benchmark our success by our industry partners, by our competitors. We know what success looks like by competitive benchmarking. If we create business models where we define success in a way that no one else agrees with, that might be fine for you, but it's going to be really hard to make moves and change that industry. And so creating industry norms, which seems like what you're doing as an industry right now, part of that process includes identifying best practices or key success factors likely due to your customer outcomes, literacy, reading outcomes. That seems, I have some friends that are attempting to unschool their child, and I think that there's some really good promise there. I would like it if the child knew how to read. This is my nephew, so I would really like it if, I think they're onto something, but at the same time, I do think that there's a shared understanding of what success looks like is essential for entrepreneurs to have goals. Because if you don't know what successful education looks like, then what you're investing in, the capabilities or opportunities that you're pursuing, if we're not sure what the good outcomes are, how do you know if you're doing well? How do you know where you need to be doing better? How do you know what we should be correcting, or what maybe we should be moving out of our school and using more as through our suppliers or through our networks, and more of what we really need to put into our school and our capabilities and our resource base. So, industry best practices.
And I'd like to just piggyback a little bit off of that in education kind of terms. You know, we've decided as a nation that sitting in rows and being in a bell system is successful. If you can sit quietly for 8 hours, that is a measure of success for us. If your child can transition from one classroom to the other without talking or touching anything or doing anything, then we are successful, right? And then, you know, our success measures have been closely related to being able to have factory workers, and what we're building right now are non-busy bee, entrepreneurial, like successful people who are happy and thriving in society, giving back to their communities in many different ways. So really, I'm going to throw this on the professors and the higher ed to come up with and help us to come. We're busy. We're in the trenches. We are wiping the noses, drying the tears. We need you guys. We need you right now to help us by studying what's happening, coming up with best practices, analyzing the market, our markets, and publishing. National Microschooling Center just came out with a beautiful analysis. I really highly recommend that you take just a moment today at lunch to download that. But we need some of the higher structures to help us to identify what are the key factors of success so that we can have some barometer of like, how close are we getting to this? How do you measure joy? I don't know, but that's what you institution people need to do, be working on. Give us the Lipness scale for joy, please. Like, I will implement it. I don't have time to build that. And so I think the relationship right now with higher ed and what we're doing are to create these, if we're going to continue to test, is testing even a best practice moving in the I don't know. I'm dealing with kids right now. Like, I can't do that. So I think for any of the professors out here who are in higher ed, we're really counting on you and your support and your knowledge production to help us to analyze what's happening and really codify some of the better practices so that we have a compass to be able to gauge things off of. And I think, Eric, you've been doing some of that work really successfully. Again, National Microschooling Center has really been pointing, yes, every kid, really getting some language down of like, you know, it's successful if you launch and if you keep your doors open for a year, but some of the measures of success within education, I think we're passing that to you all.
Well, we'll go to the next question, but go to Matt Lee and John Thompson and Angela Watson's research session later.
Hi, sorry. My name is Paz, and I'm from Montana Hybrid Academy, and we focus on a bushcraft primitive skills curriculum. And my question is, in building kind of a solid family business or a legacy business, because that's really important to us, what are some of those key pillars that you see as like foundational items that we should be implementing? Thank you.
Yeah, very wonderful. So a successful family business, especially if we're talking a multi-generational business, is going to look different than almost any other structure. They're not super rare. It's not like you have to think of identify new measures of profit or outcomes, but they do look different. And one of I would say the biggest key to what makes a family business, a successful long-term family business different, is that they lean into those family-centered networks. They leverage the relational capital, the deep, intimate ties of those family relationships to access unique assets, unique capabilities nested in that network that no professional network can ever dream of accessing. And so if you have a really dysfunctional family, you also don't get to do that. So it's identifying not just that we want to be a good family business, but that we have the capacity, that we actually have an opportunity to be a good family business that looks like our family. Once you have that base, once you actually have that opportunity, then the strategy also looks different. And the biggest difference would be a long-term orientation, an explicit, multi-generational long-term orientation where you're pursuing opportunities, you're running your business with the intention of passing that on to the next generation. And what that means in your short term is oftentimes accepting shallower growth proposals, not accepting equity dilution events. So if an investor comes in and says, hey, let me give you a bunch of money for 15% of your company, that's not attractive to you. It might be attractive if you're an entrepreneur trying to make a quick exit, but if you're trying to build a sustained legacy business, then you really are more focused on how you can maintain using your internal resources. And so that long-term orientation is probably the strategic difference. And then the access to family resources, oftentimes social resources, not necessarily wealth, although that helps, but access to family resources, socio-emotional orientations, and shared legacy orientations just gives you an amount of trust and collaborative intensity in those networks that you just wouldn't be able to get in a professional network. No executive team is going to come together with that level of relational capital to sustain the depth of collaboration that family teams can. And so the family teams that are most successful are the ones that are collaborating like that.
Oh, okay, so in our state, we're from Missouri. We're from Missouri, and the thing that we have loved to listen to is just the passion and the ingenuity, the ability to serve all students and serve all students well. But how, I think for us in Missouri, in order to be able to utilize vouchers to serve every student in the state, or any student that might choose that perhaps our school is a good fit for them, we have to be accredited. And so we have all these comments that are happening, and it's all this ingenuity and all this lovely thinking and rethinking education to roll back to, but how do we get accredited in order to access the funds that will be able to ensure that any child that wants to come to our school is able to do so. And that, for us, we're very passionate about. So I would just love any recommendations on how to marry those two things and do that well for children.
I think you're spot on one of the things that we're trying to understand. Again, all my beautiful professors here, I think that maybe an accrediting body might be in order for us to be able to participate. Oh, well, there we go. I keep looking at Eric. I'm like, add this to your plate.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead and make an accreditation system.
It's definitely worth talking about. Be careful what you wish for.
You know, how we've tried to solve that at Colossal is that I went the private school route because I wanted to be able to make sure that what we were doing was accessible. People who have wealth can make their schools and have whatever they want whenever. I'm interested in the workers at Walgreens kids, right? Like, these are real not that other families are not real families. I'm just talking about, like, people I know how to talk to. So, like, that was important to me. It continues to be important to me. And so what I did was I went for systems accreditation. So everybody who falls under a Colossal umbrella would be automatically accredited. So I would take a look and see if there's anything local for you. InEd is working on a system accreditation as well so that our members could be accredited. National Microschooling Center, you might have some insights into that. I'm sorry, and hopefully, you know, I hear what you're saying, and it's definitely a problem we're trying to solve. I think if we have to workshop together and get on meetings so that we can figure out how to do the accreditation, it's not easy. And we're in the trenches again. We're still like, you know, wiping the tears of our kids and the moms and, and our own children, right? And so perhaps what might be in order is for like a place like Cognia to also respond to what we're needing to be able to, that it's a whole new market that they have open. And so I think that they're gonna have to be responsive, or someplace like the National Microschooling Center or Kennesaw State or Bill Maddox, maybe you wanna open your own accrediting board. It's not that hard, it's just a lot of work. Maybe we need a new accreditation that would be nationally recognized and state recognized. We're not there yet, but we will be. And so just keep that in your heart, it's coming, it's coming.
So the dynamic that you both have been talking about as far as, I'm from Transfiguration Orthodox Academy in Marietta, Georgia. The dynamic that you all have been talking about as far as the kind of family business aspect of things is really interesting, succession, all that stuff. My own father started a small parochial school up in Boston 30-something years ago, which I guess would be designated as a micro school now. He's still the head of school after 35 years, and he's 75 years old. And I don't I don't know if he's ever going to retire. So this idea of family succession. I didn't succeed him directly as far as the school's concerned, but then we started another little school here. But I'm curious to hear any kind of, stories about succession that happened more immediately within the organization where the spirit of the organization, the ethos, the culture were actually transferred down because the idea of the family business and then models for succession feel like two very different kind of vibes, as it were, and just being able to clone you can't clone yourself or kind of cryogenically freeze yourself or what or turn your brain into an AI model or something like that. I mean all that sounds really exciting, but it doesn't feel like it's actually So anyway, so if you could speak a little bit more to like other stories of family businesses or whatever the case is that had that kind of succession in a organic and authentic way, I guess would be interesting.
Totally. So succession is of course one of a very fun topic in family business, but it's important to remember it's not succession. The continuity of organizations is not something only family businesses care about, and so there's a lot of differences between succession in non-family context and in family context. And one of the differences is, I think, something you hit at, which is in a non-family context. And if you're a CEO or a principal, you're likely grooming your successor to look more like you, to try to continue on your orientation of maintaining what this school looks like. And so it looks like a much narrower form of continuity than what you see in family businesses, because as you mentioned, your role model that you were talking about, your uncle that started that school, you don't think of that person just as that school owner. You have a full version of that person in your mind, a better understanding of their motivations, of their strengths, of their weaknesses than maybe someone who only knows them as a professional person does. And so you can family owners can inspire their successors in ways that don't look like taking over my one individual business. It might look like inspiring them with that same entrepreneurial orientation, inspiring them with that same unwillingness to accept the imperfections of our world, or a courage to shine light to truth when you think it's really important to do that. And that might look like running an entirely different kind of organization or an entirely different kind of school, but you're still being true to that legacy. And so when we're thinking about why succession, why multi-generational family enterprises can be so cool, and how they can be relevant to schools is because there's just such a greater level of overlap that the grooming of a family successor, the preparation of a family successor to take over a business doesn't just look like professional development. It doesn't just look like a skills and competency tests. It looks like it's an embodying experience of being the matriarch or patriarch of a system, of an entire portfolio of work that includes family assets, business assets, family outcomes, business outcomes, and all the stakeholders in between. With that in mind, there's tons of stories of successful succession events, just as many of poor succession. And there's a lot to learn from being able to maintain that again, that's that long-term orientation of just working with multiple generations of the same family together is going to give you a better understanding of what that future generation's innovation is going to look like than is a 5-year intensive, right before I retire, you come in and let me show you how to do my job, and then you can do my job. And that kind of succession, that kind of successor training is just way less successful. In family businesses and non-family businesses as well. When a really creative founder of a company retires and their successor takes over, if you're a savvy investor, you're probably that's a big red flag, even if it's a really good successor, because we don't know what makes a phenomenal CEO a phenomenal CEO. We can say that we do. We can write books about the things about getting up early and making sure you have a good breakfast or whatnot. But the reality is it's different every single time. And so the best chance you have of inspiring greatness, if you can identify greatness, the best chance that you have of actually capturing that is going to come from successor training that looks very multidimensional. It looks like just as much of the work that goes on around a dinner table as it does around a boardroom.
All right. Sorry, that's going to have to be the end because we're out of time, and I have to give some logistical notes. But thank you both. That was fantastic. If you have more questions, come harass them during the day.